Ben Carpenter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to briefly introduce you. I've written something down, just something brief. So I'm going to address everyone watching on YouTube and Spotify. Ben Carpenter is simultaneously one of the most kind, empathetic, don't laugh, Ben, it's not nice, kind, empathetic, intelligent, and articulate humans I've ever met. And that is not hyperbole. I mean every word of it, every syllable of it. He's not only phenomenal at breaking down complex fitness topics, he's truly a wonderful human being. I look up to him immensely, and I'm ecstatic to introduce you to him. Ben Carpenter, welcome to the show.
Oh God, what a lovely intro. You nearly brought a tear to my eye. That was so sentimental.
You were laughing the whole time. Yeah,
yeah, that's like awkward laughing. That's awkward laughing. That was really kind. Yeah, thank you.
I meant every word, man. Thank you for being here. Do you want to give everyone, so we've done one podcast before. I think it was
2020.
2020. Okay, so we'll put that in the show notes. Do you want to briefly just introduce yourself? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
I don't feel like your introduction was as good as I could ever hope for. I am essentially a personal trainer. I've been a personal trainer since 2006. I've made social media content since 2009. And as of the last couple of years, I am technically an author. I should say best-selling author because it would be downplaying not to say that. But I describe myself as a personal trainer who kind of accidentally built a social media following. And that's the extent of my introduction, I think.
And what's the name of your book?
I have two books. First one was called Everything Fat Loss. And then the second book was called Fat Loss Habits.
Which one, if they had to pick only one, which one should they get?
If you're very nerdy, the first one.
Okay.
And if you want something easier, the second one.
Okay.
My brother said this to me, and he was like, I love you to pieces, but I couldn't read your first book. It was too much. And then he messaged me and said, I'm on like chapter 4 and I love the second one. I was like, that's explains why I wrote the second one.
Perfect. Okay. All right. We're just going to jump right in then. Let's just have a great conversation. Yeah. So last night you said, I've spent my whole life training for aesthetics. And by the way, last night, Ben is staying at my house right now. We were having dinner. We had a great time. I charred the steaks. It was too much, but it was cooked well in the middle, which was good. You said, I've spent my whole life training for aesthetics. And I realized that if I had a kid, I wouldn't even be able to play with them the way I want to. Have you changed your training to accommodate for that? And if yes, how?
Great question. I think a lot of people in the fitness industry can probably resonate with the idea of wanting to look a certain way and wanting to be quote unquote in good shape. And I think being a personal trainer is something that probably reinforced that. There's a body image pressure to look a certain way. Clients hire you if you look a certain way. Your body is your business card is a popular quote in the fitness industry. So for a lot of my career, which has been my whole adult life, I have wanted to look a certain way and feel like I portray the fitness lifestyle. But I feel like portraying the fitness lifestyle via how you look and how you function are very different things. So I have been at least amateur fitness model and been a fairly muscular guy with a six-pack since I was like 18 or 19 or whatever. But my actual fitness was terrible.
What do you mean by that, actual fitness?
So I would describe it, if you put me on any standardized fitness test, I would have fucking sucked. Whether it was mobility, whether it was explosive power, whether it was cardiorespiratory fitness. I used to make a joke that I looked like I was fit, but I would get out of breath running for a bus. And I made that joke on social media, and I think people really thought I was joking, but I wasn't joking. Cardio to me was like maybe 5 minutes on the bike as a lackadaisical warm-up while I'm playing on my phone, and then I would lift weights, and 99% of my fitness routine was lifting weights. So if I ever had to jog for something outside, I was like, this is harder for me than it should be. And it shouldn't be as difficult for me to do this. I shouldn't be struggling to do really basic things like if I was jogging for a bus, I shouldn't feel like I'm out of breath for 30 seconds of jogging. And I felt like I wasn't really portraying the fitness lifestyle that I wanted. And I realized a couple of years ago, I was doing some stats for a social media video. I realized that in America, I am basically at half the age of when most men are expected to die. And it kind of freaked me out because I know that at this point is where a lot of people start declining. Like people start losing muscle tissue very, very gradually. People start losing strength very, very gradually. And I just felt like I wasn't functioning as well as I should for someone who works in the fitness industry. And I changed my training to slowly change my training to improve that.
Let me ask you this. So you're incredibly well-versed in the research and literature. You spend a lot of time doing that, and you know how to read it, which is unique for the vast majority of the population, never mind the fitness industry. You obviously knew that cardio would be good for you,
Yeah.
but you weren't doing it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So I think, you know how people perceive personal trainers to be very disciplined? A lot of personal trainers will call themselves disciplined. Like, it's not about motivation, it's about discipline. Like all of those cliches.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I like to point out to clients is you see them as disciplined, but you're looking at them as disciplined at their chosen task. So it's like asking someone who loves reading how they stay disciplined to read. They're like, I love it. They're not having to twist their own arm into doing it. They're not having to dig deep and find motivation or grit their teeth. They're just doing the thing that they enjoy. And to me, I enjoyed lifting weights. There are numerous reasons why I enjoyed lifting weights. Number one is I was training for aesthetics, so it was a means to an end. Number two, I love numbers. And I love looking in my workout log and being like, I bench pressed 1 extra rep at this weight or 1.25 extra kilos at this weight. I liked seeing the progress and I liked being able to quantify it. I just didn't enjoy cardio. I didn't enjoy it in the same way. I didn't get the same gratification when I enjoyed it, when I did it. It wasn't something that I did in a way that was measurable. So if I went on the bike for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, it's like, oh, I biked this far. Whereas if you tell a guy they could bench 2 plates for the first time, or the first time they benched 3 plates or whatever it was, to me, that was exciting. So I was excited by the idea of bench pressing 3 plates for the first time. I was excited by the idea that I might be able to do a pull-up with my whole weight attached to my waist. And those things would excite me. But I was never like, I think it'd be great if I could run a mile in 6 minutes or 5 minutes. My brain didn't work like that.
And has that changed?
It has changed. The thing that I think is interesting is I think a lot of people think that motivation has to come first before action. And I don't always think that's the case. I feel like action can sometimes be a catalyst for motivation itself. So what I started doing was like bare bones because I hated it, literally hated cardio. I used to kind of habit stack it where I would do my weight training workout. And then while I was at the gym, I'd do 5 minutes at the end. And then I would do it a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster, but in a way that it was measurable. So it's like I started with a fast walk and then I'd do 0.1 mile per hour faster, 0.1 mile per hour faster, a little bit until I got to the point where I was jogging really slowly. And I was like, oh, it's been quite nice seeing this progress. And it's kind of silly because going from walking to jogging isn't really progress because I could have jogged to begin with. But it was seeing in my workout log that it was getting faster. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then when I was jogging, I was like, oh, this jog feels a little bit easier. I can go a little bit faster and a little bit further. And it was being able to measure it and write it down where suddenly it became exciting. But I do feel like having a goal helped facilitate that. So if it hadn't been for my wife running and me wanting to run with her, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But when I knew that she wanted me to run with her, she said one day, I would love it if we could go for a jog together someday. And I remember being like, oh, that'd be cool. If it hadn't been for her saying that, I probably wouldn't have bothered. That was the seed.
But so you mentioned almost like two different seeds. On one hand, you realize you're about half the age of where men in America are dying. On the other hand, your wife wanting to share this special experience together. Do you think it was a combination of them, or how do you think this played out?
So I think she was the main catalyst for it. And then as I was getting into doing it a little bit more, I think it was probably startling for me how much I sucked at it.
Yeah.
There's something very humbling about being good at one fitness endeavor and then trying something different. Like you are very experienced with powerlifting, and then you're moving on to practicing the splits and things like that. And you're like, I'm really good at this. This is really hard. And realizing when I started jogging how terrible I was at it was kind of a kick up the arse for me, because I tried jogging on a treadmill for like 5 minutes, and I asked her to film me because I like having footage of things, because that way, if 2 years later, if you've stuck with something, it's really nice seeing that first video. And I asked her to film me, and I watched the video back, and I was like, what am I doing? I look like Bambi on ice learning to rollerblade. Like, that's how awkward I looked on a treadmill doing a really slow jog. And I used to be really athletic. And I remember reading or hearing somewhere that the last time a lot of adults ever sprinted was when they were in high school. And that kind of struck a chord with me, because I realized that I was looking at signs of deterioration, because I used to be athletic. I used to run and play sports and stuff. And I just thought, I can't do that anymore. I couldn't do it in the way that I wanted. So it was a little bit of a reality check. She was the catalyst. And then the reality check was, I shouldn't be finding this as hard as I'm finding it.
Yeah. You know, you just said something very interesting in regard to taking videos of yourself, especially the first time when you know you're going to be bad at it. And I remember, I still deal with this now in the inner circle with new members, but more when I was doing one-on-one coaching, I would have people send me before pictures. And one of the most common struggles people had with that was they didn't want to see what they looked like.
I've got such a good story for this.
I want to hear it.
But you keep going.
They didn't want to see what they looked like. They were nervous. And it was something that I struggled with, because I didn't want to force someone to do that. But in the same moment, in the same breath, I also understand the thing that led you to really stick with running was that reality check. It was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how bad this actually was. And through years and years of coaching people, I realized out of everyone who had sent me a before picture, not a single one, literally out of thousands, not a single one regretted sending it.
Yeah.
There were many who I let off the hook and said, oh, you know what, fine, you don't need to send it. Every one of them regretted not sending that picture, because then they didn't have the first picture to look back on after they'd made however much progress. So I do think it's interesting, and it says a lot about how you've embraced this feeling of when you're at your worst, you're actually going to record it and document it so you can go back to it and maybe even use it as motivation.
And so your story is exactly what I was going to say, and I was my example of that. So one of the reasons I now record things early is because I made the same mistake myself. So I was, I think 21 years old. When I was first diagnosed with Crohn's disease, I lost a lot of weight really quickly. It was a while before I was diagnosed. I was kind of gradually losing weight. And I got down to 132 pounds. And at the moment, I'm kind of, I've hovered between 175 and 185 for my whole adult life, apart from that moment. And I got to the point where I was extremely frail. Frail as in, if I wanted to walk from here to the bedroom in the house, I used to have to put my arm around my mum because I couldn't do it on my own. Frail to the point that I once fell over on the stairs in the middle of the night. And even though there was a handrail there and I held onto it, I didn't have enough total body strength, including my hands, to stand up on my own. And I was so frail and so weak. And when I started getting back into training again, that's like another reason that training to look a certain way was such an ingrained thing for me, because I saw how people treated me differently when I was frail. And that's like a whole other topic.
Yeah.
That's like one for the therapist. And my sister said to me one day, when I started exercising again, she said, I think you should take a photo of yourself. She said, the reason is, when people hire personal trainers, they often see the young muscular dude.
Yeah.
And a lot of people won't resonate with that person because they're like, you don't know my struggles, you look like this, you've got a six-pack. Like, I still hear people saying that to me now. What would you know because you look like that? You don't know what it's really like. And she said, if you took a photo of yourself now, when you get back to the shape, hopefully, that you were in before, you will have proof to show people the depths of hell that you went through to get back to that point. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Why not?
I remember looking in the mirror, thinking I should take a photo and just being like, I can't. To me, it was unbearable because looking back at my reflection was it wasn't just about the way I looked. It was a reflection of my physical health. And it was looking and knowing that I was at a point, I was at a point in my life where I remember talking to my mum and I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to make this. Like, I had been declining for so long that I literally wasn't sure if I was going to get out the other end for several weeks or months or whatever it was. I wasn't being diagnosed. We didn't know what was wrong. So I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And there were times where I was like, I don't even know if this is ever going to stop. I don't know if I'm going to survive this. And looking at myself in the mirror, for someone who went from being kind of like a wannabe fitness model, I wasn't at the time, but that had always been my goal, be on the front cover of Men's Health, like everyone's young guy's goals. When I looked in the mirror, it was painful because I would look back at myself and it's like I wouldn't recognize the person looking back at me. And so much of my self-esteem was intertwined with the way I look that it was almost like I couldn't even look at a photo of myself, and I kick myself the number of times since where I'm like, I wish I had a photo. If for no other reason. It's not necessarily about the physical transition. It's not like, even when you said before photo you went like that, and I know why. It's not about necessarily the physical transition or implying that everything that matters is portrayed with a photo. It was that photo would have helped demonstrate how poor my health was at the time. And looking back on it, I think would be really refreshing. And I'm still to this day gutted that I hadn't taken the photo. And that is why I will sometimes film myself doing stupid shit. Not stupid shit. The fact I'm even saying it like that is kind of pertinent. If I'm doing something that I suck at, sometimes I will film it.
Yeah. Something that maybe it's not stupid, but you might think you look stupid to someone who's more experienced.
Yeah, and you know what? This is kind of like humbling from a personal trainer perspective, because every time I posted videos of me running, at least one person would comment on how bad my running technique was. Seriously.
That's so interesting.
Why'd you run?
Not surprising,
and like, why'd you run like that? Why'd you do that with your arms? Why don't you like all these like little comments? And like, the fact that I'm this experienced in the fitness industry and I've got to the point where I look a certain way that a lot of people would want to emulate and aspire to. And I know that because people have said that. It's not trying to be big-headed. I literally had clients that used to come up to me and say, I want your physique. Can I hire you? So much of the way I looked was wrapped up in my career success and things like that. That having people commenting something negatively, like, I'm at a point in my career when I'm kind of secure enough that I can laugh that off.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't been doing this for so long and I was doing jogging for the first time as my first ever fitness pursuit, like a lot of people trying to exercise for the first time do, that would be really disheartening.
Yeah.
If I was a middle-aged guy who has never gone to the gym, never done any form of exercise, and I try jogging for the first time, and then you get those little comments like, your running technique's terrible, why'd you do this, why'd you do this? That would be enough for me to be like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But it was kind of nice because people respected what I had achieved so far, and then they saw me sucking at something, and it was like, this made this okay. But if I didn't have this, people would have laughed at me a lot more, and that would have been hard.
How did people treat you differently when you were at your lowest compared to like when you have a physique right now? Like, what were the differences?
One of the things that was really difficult, I tried to explain this to someone, and the way I described it is, if you're a young guy and you're muscular, imagine that for the first time ever, like imagine you're an insecure teenager and you start lifting weights, you start doing sit-ups in your bedroom and all of that stuff. And then out of nowhere, you start getting compliments.
Mm-hmm.
Girls are complimenting you at school, like, oh, I love your stomach and things like that. And it was this validation and reinforcement that what I was doing was working. But all of a sudden, I'm being complimented. I'm being complimented by girls. I've never had that before. And I think that was part of the reason that kind of spurred it on, where I carried on doing what I was doing because I liked the validation. I liked other people saying nice things to me. And I remember after I was ill, I went, one of the first times I went back to the gym, I remember my whole attitude towards the gym was different, because the gym was my place. It was like my second home. You go into a gym where I used to work in gyms and be a personal training manager in one gym. So when I walk back into the gym, very comfortable. All the staff know me. A lot of the members know me. I've trained there for years. And going back for the first time after I had been so ill was difficult, because I could tell people looking at me like, what the fuck happened to you? And I remember one of my friends, I was sitting there and she came and sat next to me. It's just like one of those bars at the gym where they serve protein shakes and shit. And she literally didn't know who I was.
She literally didn't recognize you.
She looked at me twice and said, sorry, I didn't recognize you. I'm so sorry. And it was hard because I went from like, what's the best way to explain this? Imagine you're a fitness model and you walk on the beach and you know people are looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not looking at you for your personality, let's be honest. That to me was kind of almost like the only way that I had people saying nice things about me, because they meet me for the first time. Oh my God, I love your arms. Oh my God, I love your six pack. And that was like the compliment that I would get. And when that vanished, I was like, I don't know what I've got left. And I know that's really sad to point out, because I like to think I've got a lovely personality. But what was interesting is I got so used to people complimenting me only on the way that I looked, that when that was gone, I realized I didn't know what I had left. Mm-hmm. It was like losing the thing that you were known for. I was a personal trainer. I was known for looking a certain way. I was known for looking muscular. And when that was gone, I felt like I've kind of felt empty. I felt shy. I went from being confident when I walked into a room to not wanting to walk into a room. So I spent months just being at home, being a recluse. And I remember, because clients literally used to say to me, I want to build muscle and look like you. Can I hire you? I spent a whole year off from work because I couldn't go back to the gym until I felt like I would still kind of blend in. Like, you will know at least one personal trainer who you think is great, but they will get comments from people saying, why should I listen to your advice? You're not muscular enough, or you've got too much body fat, or you're not strong enough, or whatever it is. People get insulted for the way they look regardless of their knowledge. And even though my knowledge hadn't changed, if anything, my knowledge was better because I'd spent a year at home on my own, still being able to read and stuff. But my physique didn't emulate that. And I knew that people wouldn't hire me because of the way I looked. And I think that was a shame.
Were there, outside of the gym, just in life, and I know you were at home mostly, but were there people who, did you notice ways that people treated you differently outside as opposed to like outside of the gym setting? Or was it a lot of like how you thought of yourself, or it was a combination of the two?
There was definitely how I thought about myself, but there's a very long period of time where I realized that they were the only compliments I ever got. That was hard.
Got it.
Yeah. If like when you're 20, 21 years old, I'm at the age where I can go out and go into cocktail bars and go into nightclubs and stuff like that. And the only time people ever complimented me was for my physique. And I realized that when that had gone, that too much of my self-esteem had been interwoven with the vanity that I felt, partly because of how many people would comment on that. So it was this kind of positive reinforcement where people would say nice things to me and then I wanted to keep going. And then my self-esteem hinged too much on the way that I looked. So when I lost it, it was debilitating.
Do you still struggle with any of that today? Is there any, even though like you have an objectively extraordinary physique, like very muscular, very lean, do you still struggle with any of the things that started as a result of that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I've grown a lot psychologically. It was a big learning curve. Realizing that was quite a slap in the face. Because if you list all the good things about yourself, I would love to think that the way you look is never supposed to be number one. But I realized that if other people wrote down nice things about me, when people first met me, how I looked was always number one, like the way my body was. I think there were always always going to be remnants of that. I feel like my own journey with my own body image and the way I feel about myself, I don't think is ever going to be fully healed, if you will. I feel like it's kind of like someone with an eating disorder that goes through eating disorder recovery, but that's always there. There's always a red flag. And I think I've grown up to the point that I know that I have a lot more to offer the world. And I have amazing friends who say lovely things about me, and they say lovely things about me, hopefully regardless of how I look. But I do think the world treats you differently depending on your physique, more so than I think most people realize unless they've been through some kind of change.
You know, it's interesting. It brings up a unique insight into, especially for a lot of the people that we work with who say, oh, if I just looked like that, I'd be so much happier. They'll say like, I'd be a happier person. Maybe I'd be more confident. But you bring up this interesting perspective from where you've had this physique that has led to, that at some points have given you, it's given you confidence. But as a result of that being the main thing that people noticed and essentially objectified, I feel like it's taken away from you feeling like that's the only reason why they care about me to begin with. So let's just, you take someone who's like, if I just looked like that, all of a sudden everything would be different. Objectively, it's, well, not necessarily. Not everything would be better. You might not be more happy or more proud, because now if that's the main thing that people are looking at, if that's the main thing that people care about, and they don't care about who you are, what you have to say, your thoughts, your opinions, your morals, your ethics, all of a sudden it's like you might actually start to detest that you look that way, because that's the only thing people care about, especially at first sight.
And I get backlash for this when I talk about it online, because if I talk about things like body image in the fitness industry, there will always be a subset of people that will look at me and say, it's easy for you to talk about that because you look like that. If you look like me and you had a lot more body fat, or you look like me and you didn't have as much muscle, this would be a completely different topic. You never know what we're going through. And I get it. I do totally get that. But I also think that it feels like an important lesson for me to help teach people, because so many people do the same kind of thing where they're seeking something deeper, and the aesthetic change is the vehicle they think will help them get there. So right at the beginning of my first book, I had a chapter called Why Do You Want to Lose Weight? And I said, typically people are driven by two motivators. They often think that they will be healthier, or they often think they will be happier. And whilst I do think that changing the way you look, or changing how much you weigh, or how much body fat you have, can take you towards those goals in a lot of cases, I think sometimes you jump on this vehicle thinking you will get there, and you don't always get there. Like people trying to improve their health by losing weight, but then they crash diet, or people trying to improve their confidence by training to look a certain way, and then getting in the position I did where they realize too much of their confidence hinges on how they look. I feel like real true confidence would be the person who walks down the beach thinking they look like a fucking boss, regardless of how they look. Like the confidence to show up in whatever swimwear you want, at whatever public event you want, without worrying what your body fat percentage is. To me, that's way more confident than a lot of fitness models where they don't feel confident unless they're in show ready. So like a good friend of mine years and years ago, he was a literal competitor in one of the fitness modeling world championships, like WBFF world championships. Won titles going up to that, went into European, then went into world. Like objectively, one of the leanest and most muscular people in the planet. We're talking like percentage of a percentage, makes me look skinny and makes me look fat, one of those type of people. And I remember him saying to me when we were at an expo together, he said, I'm not doing any photos with my top off because I'm off season and I've gained a few pounds. Yeah. And I'm like, he's talking about being like 5 or 10 pounds off the 0.00001% of people on the whole planet of how he looks, and now he won't take his top off. So to me, I like talking to people and trying to reassure them or maybe guide them that if they're trying to be confident, changing the way they look is not always a reliable vehicle to get there. And there was actually a recent video that I saw on Instagram, which I think was a really interesting example of this. It was a video of Halle Berry, and she was talking, and she said that she very politely said that she's fed up of only being called pretty. And it was like, seeing it kind of slapped me in the face. And she's like, I just want to be known for something else. Like, it's a compliment. It is a compliment. Like, but when that's the only compliment you ever receive, there's a lot more character depth to that. And her saying it showed the controversy, because I remember reading through the comments and people were like, oh, it's such a pain in the ass being pretty. And it's like, no, that's not the point. The point is she's a whole person and a whole personality, and that's the only compliment she's had for however many years or decades or whatever. And that's kind of how I feel like if you go chasing down the aesthetic rabbit hole, hopefully you know that there is hopefully a lot more to you as a person than the way you look.
You know, one of the most common questions I'm sure you get as well is, you know, how do I stay motivated to do this? Like, how am I going to stay consistent? People get started. And what I've noticed is that, like you said, most people would probably start from the perspective of they think it's going to make them healthier or happier / more confident, right? But the vast majority of people don't stick with it. What I've noticed, and I've been very blessed and fortunate enough to, I do a lot of interviews with people who've lost 50, 100 plus pounds and kept it off for many years. And I always make sure to ask, like, what made this change final? Every single one stems from fear. And it wasn't from a place of, I want to impress people. I want to look better with my shirt off. There are some people, in my experience, it's generally younger people, that is like how they get into fitness. Like, I want to look this way at the pool. I want to look this way at the party. I want this person to see me this way. But especially as people get older, I've noticed that fear is the most common reason why someone will make a change. And even going back to the earlier conversation, your fear of deteriorating is one of the things that has led you to now be more consistent with your running, to the point where now you want to do a half marathon, right? Even though you still hate running, your fear, in combination with your love of your wife and wanting to spend time with her, is one of the major things that's keeping you consistent. Have you noticed the same, whether it's in other people, whether it's in yourself, whether it's in research, that among the driving factors that cause people to stay consistent with something, even if they don't love it, is fear or something else? So
what you just said, I think, is a very eloquent way of explaining something that you can also see in the research literature. So I've read a lot about exercise motivations, and you basically survey a group of people. Like, let's say you get 50 friends or 50 people in front of you. Obviously, it wouldn't be friends if you're doing research, but you know what I mean. And you ask them what their motivations are to exercise. You can do like a qualitative analysis of exercise motivations. And if you survey younger people, they tend to a lot of the time be physically motivated. I want to look a certain way. And then when you survey older people, that often changes, like you said, where it's things like, I want to be alive to play with my grandkids. I want to live longer. I want to be able to go on holiday with my wife or husband for more years before we go into a home, like those type of things. So I feel like exercise motivations evolve over the time course of most people's lives. And one of the things that I always try and explain to people is that health and fitness, they're like a dial. It's not on or off, which is how a lot of people approach them. It's always there. It's always there in the background, whether you address it or not. Your fitness level, your strength, whatever, is always doing something. Even if you're completely neglecting it, the dial is turned down, and you can walk a little bit more or start jogging a little bit more or start lifting weights or whatever, and you can turn the dial up. You need to find reasons to make that part of your life going forward, because unless you are trying to be fitter or healthier for a short period of time, this is something that ideally you do for the rest of your life.
Correct.
No one is like, you know what, I want to get strong for 3 months.
Correct.
That's it. But that is predominantly how a lot of people approach their fitness regimes, where they're like, I want to lose weight for summer. So they go to the gym, they lose weight for summer, and then summer happens, and then it's very seasonal. They quit, winter comes, weight gain occurs again, then they diet again for summer. But if we shift the emphasis away from how you look on the beach at summer or whether you've got a big event coming up, ideally, if you want to be fit and healthy, it would be something that you pay attention to for the rest of your life.
Correct.
So I think when you say, is fear a good motivator? I feel like the research literature tends to suggest that having deep intrinsic motivations stick with people a lot longer than fleeting extrinsic motivations. Like, I want to lose 5 pounds for my holiday in Spain in 3 months is fleeting. After,
Correct.
Whereas if you're like, I have a really deep burning desire for something that is still there for years, like, what makes you keep exercising now, for example?
Is that a question?
Sure.
I have two actually, and they're, if we're gonna peel the layers back, they're both from fear. And I'll answer your question in 1 second, because if we use the examples you use, right, we have the young kid who might want to look really good with his shirt off versus the older person who wants to live longer. I think if we really peel that layer back, the young kid who wants to look good with his shirt off is still doing that from a place of fear. Fear of not being loved, fear of not being found attractive, fear of not being wanted. And the older person, fear of not being able to go on these vacations, not being able to be at their daughter's wedding, da-da-da-da. So I have found that the people who have stuck with it are often operating from a place of fear. And I've also, the reason it's difficult for me is because I found almost this demonization of fear, which any other emotion, if someone is feeling angry and you tell your spouse, don't be angry, okay, good luck, right? Like, you don't tell someone how to feel. I don't think there's bad feelings. I think there's bad ways to deal with feelings, or maybe even not necessarily helpful ways to deal with feelings. I think fear can be an unbelievably powerful emotion, and if you harness it properly, you can use it very effectively. Now, to answer your question to me, which I very much appreciate, I have two main fears driving why I continue to work out so frequently and relatively intensely depending on the day. Number one is for my family. The fear of not being here for them. That's actually the whole reason why I started to track my blood pressure 5 years ago and made a goal of improving it. And
which I love, by the way. Like, out of all the things to track, if you list it on how important it is and then how many people do it, like, there aren't that many things with such a vast chasm between the two.
Yeah. I mean, arguably the most important and relatively easy to measure at home. But so the fear of not being here for my wife and daughters. And then the other one, and this one I think we could really dive in on, that I think fitness consumers might not be fully aware of or cognizant of yet, is a huge reason why I train is for my business. And for example, I generally lately, especially since my second daughter was born, and even when my first was born, I work out at night because the days are crazy. And the options are either wake up at like 4 or work out at like 10 or 11. And I'm not a wake up at 4 guy, so I work out at 10 or 11. So for me, the people will often say, gosh, you're just so motivated to be able to work out at 10 or 11 at night. There is some of that there, but it's also, if I don't, and I stop training altogether, and listen, I'm not jacked by any means, but my physical ability is really one of the major things that I use as an opportunity to show people, what are you capable of? Like, I've never been physically imposing. I'm a short dude. I've never been jacked or any of that, but I have been able to show people, like, you can get very strong. You can get very mobile. You can become very athletic. You can hopefully get out of pain, or at the very least reduce your pain. And so that's why so much of what I do is based around showing what your body can do, not necessarily like how you look. But I know for a fact that if I don't train and I'm not able to essentially not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, my business will likely suffer as a result of that, which is another fear of losing that. So there is an added layer of not just me, but all coaches appearing as though they're more motivated than others, when in reality, it's the situation that they're in.
This is their actual job.
It's sort of like the Biggest Loser, right? Where you put people in a situation which they're on on television, in a controlled situation, eyes of the world are on them, and they're in this competition to lose as much weight as possible. Of course, they're going to be outrageously strict, working out for 6 hours a day, starving themselves. But unfortunately, you see what happens when they go back home. Eyes aren't on them anymore. They have access to food as much as they like. And unfortunately, most of them gain all the weight back and more. It's if you have eyes on you, and this is your job, and your income is largely dependent on it, the fear and motivation, and we could potentially use those interchangeably. At the very least, there's a Venn diagram where they both intersect, makes a huge difference in regard to how much, how consistent you're likely to be.
It's funny you say that, because that is literally one of the biggest reasons I decided to work in the fitness industry. When I was like 17 years old or whatever, when people were going off to college and university, I remember people asking me what university I wanted to go to, and I was like, I don't know. A lot of people are getting quite deep in debt, and unless I'm super sure what I want to study, I just wasn't ready to make that commitment.
So smart.
So I had two options, two things that I loved. I love computers. I love working on computers. Yeah. And I loved going to the gym. And I did a work experience, I don't know what we call it here, like a 1 or 2 week intern period where you're like 16 years old and you do it for free and get, that type of thing. And I did work experience in an office, and it was soul crushing. Now, I know there's like, I don't want to stereotype everyone who works even slightly related to computers and make it sound like their job is soul crushing. I obviously don't mean that. The particular thing that I was doing, how that worked for my psychology, I just couldn't. There was something about sitting in the same chair for 8 hours a day doing what I was doing was a very repetitive task. And my brain didn't compute with it. I didn't enjoy doing it. And it didn't mean that I didn't love computers. There were other things that I could have done that would have excited me. But at the time, I didn't know what those were. And I remember talking, I think, to my sister about this. And I said, I think people that go into computers on average probably earn more money than people who go into the fitness industry. A lot of personal trainers aren't in the fitness industry that long, but I just don't think that I can do that. I'm worried what will happen to my health 10 years from now if I'm doing a job that I don't like doing and sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day. So one of the biggest motivation for me, way above money, because I picked a job that I thought would pay less, was I think it would be better for my health in the long run if I worked in the fitness industry, because working out is part of it. So I qualified, went straight into working as a personal trainer when I was like 19, and I got to exercise on the job to a degree, because if you're freelance, you can see a couple of clients, then you can go into the gym. Then you can see a couple of clients and whatever, but you're on your feet a lot. It's easy for you to work out because you're already in the gym. So all of the circumstances were like stacked in my favor to be consistent with that thing. My whole career was based on the fitness industry. Clients would hire me based on how I looked. Clients would hire me because they saw me lifting in the gym, and if I was stronger than the other personal trainers and they wanted to get strong, they would hire me. So much of that was kind of woven into the thing that motivated me. So when you say like it's easier for you to do it because you know that your business would suffer, it was the same type of thing for me.
Yeah.
The more hours I spent working out in the gym, the more that possible clients would see me working out and be like, oh, who's that dude? He looks buff.
Yep.
I want to hire him. I want to be buff as well.
Yep.
And that was my kind of career spiral.
When I was a young coach, and I say young, I was competing in powerlifting still, so I was probably 23, 24. Mm-hmm. And I was doing online, but I was mainly in person at that time. And I worked out at the gym that I worked at. But when I needed new clients, I would go pay a guest pass, a guest fee at a different gym. And I was in
just
Boston.
literally be strong as fuck elsewhere.
That's it. Mm-hmm. I would go deadlift.
Yeah.
I would go deadlift at Boston Sports Club. And inevitably, I would get at least one client to then be my client from just watching me lift.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting how that works. And unfortunately, there are some coaches who will use their physique, use their abilities, not their intelligence, and they won't continue to grow. They won't continue to learn. And it's that, you see someone in the gym doing something like, I want to look like that. I want to be like that. It's very enticing to people. It's also why, these people who are selling business courses, they might not even be successful, but they can rent out a Corvette. They can rent out a private jet. They can have a friend whose private jet it is and take a picture on it and make it appear as though it's theirs. And then all of a sudden someone thinks, oh, they're successful. Mm-hmm. I'll hire them. And it's not about their knowledge. It's about their perceived, how they look, which then goes into, we could go back to the fitness industry, people abusing drugs, steroids, whatever it is, people who are working out for 6 hours a day, doing 2 hours of cardio, this and that. It's like, I want to look like that person. It's like, you can't do it. Never mind the fact that you don't have their genetics and you don't know what drugs are taking, any of that. But for the average person looking to strength train a couple days a week, maybe do a little bit of cardio, it's a completely false premise. It's misleading at best to make people think that they're going to look like you just because of that.
And so there is actual research where if you survey people and ask why they hire personal trainers, hiring based on how they look is actually quite a high motivator, because if you see a guy who's muscular or you see a woman who's leaner and has a six-pack, there is, in the same way that sex sells, like aesthetics sell. And if you see aesthetics, your brain makes a connection that they must know what they're doing to look like that.
Correct.
And I think whether that's true or not, people will continue debating. And I don't think that debate is necessarily even that important. But the thing that I think is most important is what you have just said, because people will lever that as hard as they fucking can to capitalize on it. So what percentage of social media influencers do you think secretly take drugs?
Oh my gosh.
To be a little bit more muscular, a little bit leaner, knowing that if you're scrolling social media and you see someone who is super fucking jacked, how many young guys are like, I want to buy their program?
Yep.
Whereas if they were slightly out of shape, they don't know what they're talking about.
Correct.
And I see it all the time because people will comment on my posts. Like, I still get comments from people both ways, where occasionally if I'm shirtless and I'm lifting on like B-roll or whatever, people will accuse me of taking steroids. But if I'm dressed like this, I will still get comments from people saying, why would I listen to you? You're too skinny. Like, you don't know anything about building muscle. And I'm like, it just goes to show how quickly people will judge your knowledge based on the way that you look. And the other thing that I think is interesting, and this is at the forefront of my mind because I'm literally posting a video on it in the next couple of days. I saw a video of someone who said they are trying to start their social media influencer journey.
Oh no.
And someone commented and said, why would people follow you? You're too ugly to be a social media influencer. God. And I think it's so interesting that it's so much of social media fitness influencing is based on how the person looks rather than what they can do to help. So in theory, it shouldn't matter how you look as much as can you help the person watching. So if I was like, let's say I was super jacked, I start taking gear, I take loads of gear, I weigh twice as much, I'm massive. People would hire me on social media based on scrolling and being like, who the fuck is that guy? He must know what he's doing. I want to buy his programs. I want to buy his supplements or whatever. But you know how much you can help people because you've got a community of people that you have helped for however many years.
Correct.
So I have now found a way that some people would immediately trust me more than they would trust you.
Correct.
But you have no idea what my knowledge is. You have no idea what my program writing is like. You have no idea what I'm like as a person. I could be an arsehole to train people. I could have no empathy, no understanding of human psychology. I could be terrible at writing programs. I could look this way because I am a genetic outlier that takes a lot of drugs and lifts for however many hours a day. And people will go, I want to hire that guy, rather than being like, how can that person help me? And I think too much of people's trust hinges on the way someone looks when they're scrolling social media.
You know, this brings up a really interesting point. I recently saw you break down a Bill Maeda video, and I love Bill Maeda. He's amazing. I think he's in his 50s, like unbelievably jacked and shredded.
Yeah.
I just like his mindset. I like what the stuff that he posts. But he recently posted a video that you broke down on your Instagram, talking about how in his first couple of years of social media, once he really started to pop off, he was posting several times a day, doing exercises that he wouldn't normally do just because they looked crazy, and crazy from the perspective of impressive. Able to highlight his physique, which is incredibly impressive, able to highlight his strength and his athleticism, which is also incredibly impressive. But then he went on to say, after doing that for a couple of years, his body was breaking down. Tendons, ligaments, joints, neurologically, his central nervous system, like he just wasn't able to keep it up anymore. And the reason he had kept that pace up was because his social media was growing. He was getting more likes, more views, more followers, more recognition. And from a consumer's perspective, I think it's important to be aware that sometimes you're seeing things, and very often you're seeing things not because it's what the person does, not because it's what the person believes in, but specifically because they know that when you see that, you'll be impressed by it and then want to follow them, hire them, pay for their programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so I love that video for two reasons. Number one, he is hugely popular on social media, so I feel like when he says it, you should listen because he's saying it from a place of experience rather than sitting on the sidelines jugging the arena. But one, I love the fact that he said that his own body wasn't as healthy as you would perhaps expect. Like I think essentially he said he was doing too much training and too much of perhaps the wrong type of training, and he said his body was breaking down. And I thought it was really interesting because people will look at his physique and be like, oh my God, he's incredible. Look at some of the stuff he can do. But if he says that he's suffering with injuries, you're like, oh, perhaps I didn't think about that. But then the other thing is when he said he was in this social media hamster wheel, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people from the outside don't realize because let's say I go into your gym now and I do something crazy. I wear really small outfit because I know people are going to be interested that I'm showing lots of skin, and I just do something that you've never seen before. There's intrigue because you're scrolling like, what the fuck is that? It's not a regular squat. It's not a regular bench press. You're like, what is he doing? But the fact you've stopped is immediately social media winning. That is one of the things that impacts the algorithm where you're getting engagement. So doing things that intrigue other people, if it gets them to stop and watch your video, is good for video views. And right back when I was first a personal trainer, there was like a couple of day course that you had to go on to work at this gym where they would teach you the procedures, etc. And they actually encouraged and said, if you're struggling to get clients, we personally would recommend going out on the gym floor and doing some more novel exercises because you will get eyes on you. So in the same way that you could go to another gym and deadlift a lot of weight, knowing that other people would be like, who is that guy? You can do things that people haven't seen before or exercises that look exciting. And it means that the things that you might do in your own training and then the things you do as marketing don't always pair up. And there was like an example of someone else I won't bother naming because it's unnecessary shade, but they have admitted that the things they post on social media, that's like the highlight reel. That's not how they coach their clients necessarily. It's, I know that this works on social media, but what you're seeing is like this much of my training. You're not seeing this much of my training because this stuff is boring. And I think that's such an interesting psychological component to be aware of for social media, because ultimately people want your clicks.
Correct.
And when they're doing exercises in the gym, some of them are getting your clicks because what they're doing is amazing and they deserve your clicks. And some people are getting your clicks because they're doing something that they know is not amazing, but it looks great. And they're engineering their content in a way because they're trying to farm your clicks rather than just being like, I've got something really cool to post.
Yep.
It's, I'm going to change what I'm doing slightly because I know people are going to gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I think
It's like clickbait. It's the equivalent of clickbait.
It is 100% clickbait. A lot of people... I'll say this. A lesson that I learned from powerlifting was there's a difference between building strength and testing strength. And I think when people first get into powerlifting, they get really obsessed with it. They're like, I just want to test my 1 rep max all the time. And then after 6 months, 8 months, a year, their strength hasn't increased very much. And it's like, well, you've just been testing. Building strength is different. It takes, whether it's more volume, more time under tension. Testing strength is just, you're just displaying what you can do. And I think on social media, many of these people who are showcasing these crazy moves and these things that they don't actually do themselves, they're just displaying their ability. They're not showing what they did to be able to get that ability. They're just showing you, look at how cool this is. And people are like, I want to be able to do that. Now, one thing that I don't think people really understand about social media, and it might just be important to have this perspective because you brought up what happens when you stop on a video and the algorithm immediately says, okay, this might be interesting for more people, so they continue to show it. I think probably over the last 10 years or so, and especially over the last 5, but definitely starting probably around the last 10, we've seen a dramatic drop-off in people's trust in mainstream media. On both sides. I think people are generally far more aware of the pitfalls of mainstream media and how oftentimes they're beholden to their advertisers. They won't speak a certain way about a company if that's their advertiser, if they're paying them money. Never mind even discussing the political ideology. It's more just based around money and how in order to get more views, they'll do certain things to generate more money. As social media has changed and progressed, I've noticed, I'd say probably within the last 3 years or so, social media has really started to become like another form of mainstream media in which you have these people who are posting and likes and views are currency, literally currency, in which if you're going to work with a sponsor, you've got to show how many likes you get, how many views you get, what your click-through rate is. And I don't think that people realize I don't think that many consumers realize that they might not watch mainstream media, and maybe they do, but irrelevant, because if you're watching social media and you're watching individual creators, maybe people who you've developed a relationship with, who you think you've developed a relationship with, you've developed some form of connection with, even though it's often one way, it's not two ways. Number one, they can deceive you very easily. And number two is there's often huge financial incentive for them to be making content deliberately the way that they're making it, so you get that dopamine hit, so you want to continue watching it, so you never mind buying their product, just so you watch. Because for any number of reasons, I mean, I just found out, and I didn't realize this, I just found out if you have a certain number of views, you get paid per view on TikTok.
I get paid for TikTok.
I didn't realize that until Eric Roberts from last week told me about that. Obviously, it's happened on YouTube. It doesn't happen on Instagram yet, I don't think.
It did.
Is it still going on?
No, they did it for a little while. I think when TikTok was taking off, because TikTok was giving people money. Instagram went through a period of doing Reels bonuses,
and they don't do it anymore.
Not that.
Got it.
They don't for me. They did for a while. Yeah.
It's very interesting that I've now, in the last 3 years, I've noticed a shift from the content creators who are now far less focused on helpful information and far more focused on how do I get more views and followers. And I think that is largely, if not solely, dictated by obviously the algorithm, but the algorithm is dictated by how much money the company is making. It's like, how can we make more money? How can we get people to stay on this platform longer? And it's just for people who are spending literally hours a day on social media, like hours, multiple hours per day, consuming just in this death scroll, you have to be aware of why you're seeing what you're seeing, because the reason you're seeing it is because it's performed very, very well. And there's a really good chance that the person only made it not for your well-being, but because they're getting paid for you watching it.
I think perhaps one of the easiest ways to explain this to people would be like, me and you are experienced on social media. By almost any metric, most people would say that we have big social media platforms, like compared to the average person.
Correct.
So we have more experience on social media than most people. But if you wanted to get the most views possible, let's say you had 6 months left to live, and for whatever reason you needed to have this many views, what would you do differently to what you're doing now?
You're asking me what I would do? I would do the craziest shit. I would say the most out. It's a great thought process. It's a great a game to play. I would, in the first 3 seconds of every video,
the outrageous hook.
I would do the most outrageous thing you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
And you know who does this very well is often someone like Mr. Beast, who unsurprisingly has the most followers on YouTube. And
he's even, I've seen a video of him where he's like, if you need to grab people's attention so quickly at the beginning, and he gave examples of like, this wouldn't work, you need to make it this. And he's like, your first sentence has to be ridiculous.
Yes.
It's like the newspaper headline. If you don't catch people's attention there, they don't read the rest. So the first sentence needs to be
outrageous.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people often think about that hook in that first 3 seconds, and they don't realize
that's basically where like 6-second abs came from, isn't it? It's the same equivalent. Like, people laugh at those type of gimmicks, but that's the same way they're getting your attention, because you're like, if you saw this machine trains your core, 6-second abs, what the fuck? Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's people talk about this hook and they don't often realize there are different types of hooks. So you have the potential written hook, like whether you have that in a newspaper as a headline or literally on the video, like whatever the headline is. You also have the visual hook, what they're doing. You see someone jumping out of an airplane, or someone doing a prank on someone else, or any number of things. You have the visual hook. You also have the verbal hook, what they're saying, and they'll say something outrageous just to like, all right, what are you going to say after that? And then you also have the written hook in the caption.
Is bullshit.
Yeah, broccoli is like exactly. And I know for a fact that the people who aren't making content consistently don't know how much time these creators will spend, not just time, but money, to come up with these outrageously catchy hooks just for the first 3 seconds of their video, just to get them to keep watching. They don't realize how much of a game isn't the right word for it, but how much of a science it is, and how much they're manipulating what they do in order to keep your attention to make more money.
And I feel like even if you put the social media stuff to one side, if you go only on like fitness social media, I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine years and years ago, and they were like, you could make a lot more money if you just did all your videos shirtless. And I was like, I know, but it's not my thing. And also, like we talked about last night, if you want to get the most engagement possible, you need to say something controversial and polarizing, because if people argue in the comments, that's one of the things that drives it. So I think in the fitness scene and in the nutrition scene, like good examples of how dangerous this can be is if I pick up a food in a supermarket or a grocery store for our American friends, if I say like, this isn't the type of food you probably want to eat very often, that is boring as fuck. If I'm like, look, this is a cookie, you already know that you probably shouldn't be eating loads of cookies every single day for your health, and you'd be like, well, duh. But if I'm like, this cookie is poisoning you, you're like, what the fuck?
Yep.
So you need that aggressive language one way or the other, because nuance is boring. People don't want nuance. I could talk for 2 minutes about all of the ingredients in cookies and say like, yeah, you should eat less than this per day, like added sugar, for example, ideally less than 10% of your total daily calorie intake, like fairly well established guideline. Boring. If Correct. I say this is full of toxins and it's killing you, you're like, but it's losing all of the actual educational value.
Correct.
Because I could say, so this ingredient, it has been shown in these studies to show deleterious health effects above this dose in rodents, for example. In humans, it would translate to this. If I'm like, this, did you know this is linked with cancer? And you're like, but it means that the actual educational value of videos is abysmal.
Yes.
Because the things that educate are boring. No one wants to open a textbook.
Correct.
So it's like all the textbook stuff goes to one side, and it's like, how can you grab someone's attention in the shortest period of time? And I feel like that is why so much of nutrition is either selling the holy grail or it's selling the thing that is killing you.
Yep.
And it's got to be one of those two.
Yeah.
It is, this is full of toxins and it's giving you cancer and it's killing you, or the carnivore diet will change your life.
Yeah.
And it's like all the gray stuff in the middle just gets disappeared. And then you've got people arguing for, you've got people arguing against, you've got cults, you've got people that are arguing against the cults. And you just have this super divisive world where only the black and white ends of the spectrum exist. And all of the actual interesting conversation in the middle, no one cares about. You could say, here are some pros of a carnivore diet. And here are some cons. Boring.
Correct. You know, we don't have to get into politics, but I think one of the most recent and egregious examples is the seed oil debate. And it's funny. Here, I want to say this. I've criticized Bernie Sanders. I've criticized RFK Jr. I've criticized people on both sides because I'm not beholden to one party. I want to hold each individual to the same standard. And if someone does something that I disagree with, then I'll discuss that. I've done things
which I feel like should be a very sensible position.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
Most people watching this, you have a more educated army of followers than most influencers or whatever would. Most people are going to know that you're like, you should be able to say this is correct or not correct, regardless of the person saying it.
Correct.
They could say, I love Jordan, but I don't agree with this thing. And you'll be like, great. Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to that point, there are things I've said in the past that now I'm like, that was stupid. I don't agree with that. So you should be able to say that, you should be able to disagree with someone or publicly disagree with someone without that translating into you hate that person or the party that they belong to, whatever it is.
But you can't do that.
You can't do that.
You can't do that.
RFK Jr.'s recent, as of this recording, call it what it was, publicity stunt. I think it was Steak and Shake, I believe it was the restaurant, being so happy that they now have French fries that are fried in beef tallow instead of seed oils, which ironically, I believe they actually are still fried in seed oils first, but so now it's like doubling the caloric content from the oils. I have to say, like earlier on, about a year or two ago, I was very hopeful with RFK because he was the only mainstream candidate who was really promoting unity on both sides. He was the only one who I heard who was saying we have to stop the divisiveness. And this is when he was running as an independent. We have to stop the divisiveness. We have to bring the country together. And I loved hearing that because the divisiveness on both sides, and we see this in the fitness industry, carnivore versus vegan. We see this with everything.
As someone who's moved to America, I feel like the divisiveness here is strong.
Wild.
Strong.
It's wild. And so it was wonderful to see someone who did have a lot of support promoting that, much more than I saw from anyone on either side, whether it was Republican or Democrat. I mean, the vitriol sent across the aisle has just been gross. So I was really happy to see that. But I've been super disappointed in the clear choice to make a show out of this so it's not something that's actually going to help people. To go to Steak and Shake, make a whole big deal out of look at what they're doing. They're frying these in beef tallow now. It's like, it's still fast food and it's not any healthier for you. It's
I
sort
laughed
of like
so much I nearly snotted out of my nose when you said that because it's so obvious.
It's still fast food.
Yeah.
And it's like when people say, oh yeah, like I eat cookies, but they're gluten-free. It's like, they're still fucking cookies. It's like, and I you know, like those, you have Reese's peanut butter cups, then you have like the Justin's or something.
The organics one.
The organic.
Ones, yeah.
It's still a fucking peanut butter cup. It's not better for you in literally any way, shape, or form. To your point of finding the one thing that is going to get more views, likes, clicks, get more discussion. And I've seen people who I love with my whole heart, who they tend to lean more conservative, now so happy that RFK Jr. and MAHA is demonizing seed, and like, this is how we're going to make America healthy again. It's like, are you stupid? You really think Steak and Shake changing their fries to beef tallow is what's going to make America healthy again? Yeah. How? It's not stupid. It's delusional. And the left has their own delusions as well. It isn't a political discussion. This isn't a ideological discussion around politics. This is let's just talk about the facts. Mm-hmm. Seed oils, never, and if you want, I would love to hear your thoughts on seed oils in general, but to the point of picking the one thing that's going to kill you, the one thing that's going to make you fat, the one thing that's going to be cancerous or poisonous for you, they've demonized seed oils, and they've got an entire movement around it. And just as an American and as a regular citizen, it's so disappointing. It's really disappointing.
I think the way you've explained that has hit the nail on the head with many things, but especially finding a way to anger people. Because if I pick up any convenience kind of ultra processed, high sugar, high added fat food in the supermarket and say, ideally we should have less of these in the typical standard American diet, there's a very non-controversial thing to say. But ultimately, politicians need a fan base, and they need a fan base of people who are devoted, and they need to get donations and everything else. And it isn't very exciting to hold something up and say, like, ideally we need few of the American people eating as many of these. But it's way stronger to go, this is killing you. Mm-hmm. And seed oils have become almost a laughably convenient scapegoat. And then the same with dyes, food dyes.
Yes.
So like, as an example, I made a video about food dyes talking about this. And I knew it was a delicate topic because people are so emotionally invested in it. And I was like, here's the thing with food dyes. Do I think that American foods have a lot of problems? Absolutely. I have come from England, and the American food supply is wild compared to England. When I first came to America, grocery shopping took me probably twice as long as it takes the average person, because I was like a literal kid in a candy shop. Because I walk in, I'm like, what are all these things? Like your cereal aisle, you've got cereal with like marshmallows in, you've got cereal with chocolate bits in, you've got all the things we have in England, but then you've got like the souped up version. Yeah. So things like Fruit Loops, for example, which is the one everyone argues about, or one of the ones everyone argues about. They're super, super vibrant.
Yeah.
And they are more vibrant than Fruit Loops in other countries. And part of that is if you make a food visually appealing, people are more likely to want them. If you see something brightly colored in a bowl, it will influence your taste perception. And there's research on this where if you give people, for example, different flavor, the same flavor yogurt, but with different concentrations of food dyes, it will influence how strongly you think it tastes, which is why part of the reason why some drinks like Mountain Dew looks like you've melted a highlighter pen. Like the first time I had it, I was like, what the fuck is this? It looks radioactive. And I remember trying it and being like, whatever, I don't understand how that works here, because for me, that was stronger than any drink I've ever tried. I think there are a lot of problems with American food and American food supply, but also American demand, because ultimately, I think a lot of people view food corporations as these super evil things that are conspiring to kill you and all of that. And whilst I don't think they have your health as their best interest, I think ultimately it can be boiled down to they are often multi-billion-dollar corporations that are trying to make money, and they want food to be tasty.
Yep.
If you're at home and you're baking people a cake, and you know you can make that cake tastier by adding a bit more sugar or a few more chocolate chips or sprinkles or corn syrup or whatever, you're going to do it because you're baking a cake for a party and you want it to be delicious. So if you're in charge of a food company making cereal, you want to know if you can make it brighter, or if you can make it sweeter, or if you can add a pinch of salt if it makes people want to eat more. But ultimately, they're just trying to make money. I think that's the way I view it. And when people were zooming in on food dyes, I was like, firstly, a lot of the reasons they're zooming in on them are fallacious, because they'll say a lot of these food dyes, they don't even exist in Europe. And I was like, hi, European here, they do. You're wrong. Some of them don't. That's true. Some of them don't. You can zoom in on things and say Europe has banned this. But in Europe, we also have food dyes that are prohibited here.
Correct.
But no one says that.
Correct.
They say all of these ingredients are banned in Europe. All of these additives are banned in Europe. And I'm like, that's just not true. I saw a video of someone saying none of these additives are allowed in Europe. And I'm like, we literally have every single one of those. Sometimes they're called different things like E numbers instead of the way that you call it, like FD and C, food dye coloring. But we have a lot of the ingredients. And I think zooming in on food dyes was like the easiest way to say, like, this is killing you because look at this, it's been linked with cancer in rodents or whatever. And I'm just like, it's fucking Fruit Loops. Like, it's a very sugary processed cereal. And ultimately, no one is buying that because they're trying to be healthier. They're buying it because it tastes delicious.
Correct.
And the thing that I think was funnier that a lot of people don't realize is that some food companies have removed food dyes in the past. So like Trix cereal, I think it was, as an example, they went through a phase where they came out with a natural version and people complained because the color of the cereal was milder. So some of them you can do with natural colors pretty well. You can use things like beetroot for red, for example. Some colors don't work as well, blue and green. So if you buy like a Fruit Loop equivalent in another country, they do often look far less vibrant than they do in America. And I've seen it. But when the natural version of Trix came out, people complained. Because if you love this cereal, let's say, pick whatever, what's your favorite like junk food? What would you say yours is?
Like processed junk food?
Yeah.
Oh man, now I'm stuck on
like
cereal.
candy or anything like that.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go with cereal, but Captain Crunch.
Okay. So if they said, okay, we're gonna change our cereal and we're going to remove some of the things that make it tasty because we're being boycotted, you're like, what the fuck?
It's my favorite fucking cereal.
It's my favorite cereal.
Even though it chops up the top of my mouth.
And you'll be like, I don't eat this very often. And now they're boycotting this one cereal or this one cereal manufacturer. And you stop buying it because it doesn't taste good anymore. So the manufacturer's like, we're kind of banged to pressure and we're going to lose sales. Are they improving the health of the economy? Probably not, because you would then just move to a different cereal.
Correct. Yep.
It needs to be a whole thing. It's not just like this one dye in this one cereal. I just think it is zooming in on the thing that is easiest to sound scary, because the actual systemic issues are much more complicated to discuss. And some of the ways that people have been idolizing European manufacturing just shows me that they don't know what European manufacturing is like.
Yep.
Because we do have a lot of additives. We do not have as much variety as you have in America, I don't think. You have whole aisles of things, like your waffle section is a section.
Correct.
And the first time I came here, I was like, waffles in England, if you want waffles, it's like those are the ones you buy.
Yeah.
I came here and you had chocolate, you had blueberry, you had organic, then you had the gluten-free ones, and you had these ones with protein in, and you had these, like, there's a waffle section. I was like, this has never existed to me before. So I think the way that ultra processed food is going is becoming more treacherous from a health perspective on a societal issue. But I think shouting about a food dye in one thing is just the easiest way to make people angry. And I think it's a shame, because what is now happening is, whilst all these people are shouting about food dyes, other people are having to explain why they're probably exaggerating a little bit.
Yep.
And then you're like, what the fuck? How can you try and support these food manufacturers? And you're like, no, that's not what we're saying. So when I made this video about food dyes, I couldn't give a fuck about Fruit Loops or whatever. I tried them and I personally thought they were disgusting. Like they to me didn't taste like food. They were horrendously sweet. The food dye was the least of my concern when I was having it. I was like, you know.
It's also very, it's cult creating 101, where they get you to focus on one thing that usually doesn't even really matter that much, but you create an enemy. And I feel like the MAHA movement has made seed oils and dyes, that's the enemy, and they can all get around it, and they can all, like, we agree with that's the enemy. It's like, hold on, that's not the enemy. And if we're logical about it for 1 second and have a real discussion, we can all agree that's not the enemy. And if you've been led into believe that that's it, you've been duped. And like you were saying, there are major issues with our food supply, with the food processing that can and should and need to be addressed. But stop boiling it down to food dyes and seed oils. It's disingenuous at best.
Yeah. I've a friend of mine, he is a super, super intelligent guy, a guy called Kevin Klatt. And he is not really a social media person. He is a researcher. He's a very smart guy. He is, the way I view it, as far as people in the nutrition space go to, he sits at the top of people that I would trust to come out with an educated opinion on things. And he replied to a couple of people talking about seed oils, and specifically talking about seed oils and corn syrup. And they were using it in baby formula. You can't believe that there is corn syrup in baby formula. Can't believe there are seed oils in baby formula. And he explained why they're in baby formula. And this one is viral. This one is not. Because he's like, it's actually not that controversial. Some people need lactose free.
Yeah.
And ideally it would have lactose in to mimic breast milk. But some people need hypoallergenic formulas without lactose. So they have to put in a different sugar. And it's kind of explained, and here's how it's broken down. And it was like, this is a very boring explanation. No one cares. But if you're like, they're poisoning your kids with this, what the fuck? How you're feeding your child this? You're feeding your child this? Like, this creates emotion. And emotion is one of the like viral 101 strategies. You need to rile up your fan base. And the easiest way to rile people up is to take an ingredient. For argument's sake, let's say an ingredient that's not even nutritious. Let's say for a moment that this ingredient they're pointing out is not nutritious. It's not good enough to say this isn't nutritious. You have to make it sound like it is killing you now.
Correct.
So even with food dyes, if you talk about like, actually, here's what the research says on food dyes, I don't care. You shouldn't be feeding your kids that. It's killing them. So you have to make it polarizing. You have to make people angry.
You know, it is interesting as well. I agree. There are major issues with, especially with the food processing, that needs to be addressed. But it is also interesting how people will demonize all food processing as though, and people don't realize food processing has saved and continues to save millions and millions and millions of lives. It's ironic to me when people say food processing is bad, you should never eat processed foods. It's like the reason that we have people living as long as they do, that we have such an outrageously lower infant mortality rate, for example, due to things like baby formula and so many other things, is because of food processing. Even something like people hate on GMOs when they don't know what a GMO is, when in reality, like something like golden rice, for example, is
a great example.
It's literally able to genetically modify this rice so that then individuals in countries where they aren't able to get these nutrients, we then now get it relatively easily. They hear the, like you said, clickbait headlines, these fear-mongering, and if you don't know what golden rice is, Google it. It'll blow your mind how incredible the science is that we have that allows people to stay alive. But it's so easy for these clickbait headlines, fear-mongering headlines to lead people down a path of making black and white ideological choices that lead them down further and further and further, that don't help them, don't help anybody. It actually creates more division and, I think, further unhealthy processes.
And so I feel like a lot of my social media content is kind of putting out fires. And the way I view it is like, let's say you want to promote someone improving their diet, which all of us would agree with. Like, that is a unanimous goal. Like, you want people to live healthy lives, you want people to eat more nutritious foods, you want people to exercise. Everyone can agree that is a good goal. I think you can view it from different perspectives, because I like recommending ways people can improve their health without causing unnecessary collateral damage. And I would prefer to say you can improve your diet by eating more of these foods and eating fewer of these foods. I don't think you need to zoom in on something and make it sound unnecessarily scary using the justification that the ends justify the means. Like, I have seen people making terrible videos about things like, if you're eating Cocoa Pops, you may as well eat ant poison. Like, an actual video, I'm not even joking, said you may as well eat ant poison because this is killing you. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. This has loads of sugar in. Like, most people know you shouldn't be eating too much added sugar. You don't need to say it's like eating something that you put on your plants to kill ants.
Yeah.
To me, it's dumb. And part of the reason I feel so strongly about it is because, yes, we're in a position in society where a lot of people aren't that healthy. But I also think that eating disorders and mental health are really big things as well. And I would much prefer it if someone has a healthy attitude towards foods they can and can't eat, rather than going down this slippery slope towards eating disorder and disordered eating patterns where they're terrified of processed food, for example. And I say that as someone who used to be like this. So years and years ago, back when I was like 19, this was kind of the advice I used to follow, whereas like you can never eat anything processed. If there was sugar in something, you can't eat it because sugars are poison. If there are E numbers in something, you can't eat it because they're processed, all of this stuff. And it was unnecessary collateral damage because the amount it improved my diet relative to how scared I was to eat things, it wasn't worth it. Like, I am kind of paradoxically overall holistically healthier now than I was then. I just know that there are some things I shouldn't eat that much of, but I don't feel guilty if I eat a cookie. Whereas before I would be terrified of eating a cookie, and then if I did eat one, I would binge eat and all of that stuff. I don't think it's justifiable to make people shit scared of food unless that food really needs to be, you need to be shit scared of it. Like,
I can't think of a real actual food that people need to be shit scared of.
No, not really. Most food is not something that you should be shit scared of, because even if you pick the worst food that you can think of and you pick foods that are like super deep fried or super processed, like pick the worst food in a junk food, I was like, don't eat it that often.
Yeah,
like,
that's it.
It's like your example with processed foods. Every time I make a video explaining why not all processed food is bad, people get angry at me because they're like, I can't believe you're supporting processed food. I'm like, you're missing the point. The point is, you need to know that some people go to extreme because you need to know what the truth is. So as an example, here is how ultra processed food research tends to go. If you survey lots and lots of people and ask them to fill in diet questionnaires, what do you eat today? And you write everything down. And if you do that periodically, people have an idea of what you eat, and then they have an idea of your health. And if you look at them and you're like, oh, the people who eat more ultra processed foods, they tend to have worse health. They tend to have more body fat. They tend to die earlier. They tend to have worse mental health, whatever it is. There are many, many health conditions that you can link to ultra processed food. And you will see a lot of videos on social media saying ultra processed foods are killing you. Now, one of the things that's tricky is it's very difficult to examine people's health over a long period of time. And when you look at ultra processed food research, there is quite a lot of argument about what constitutes an ultra processed food. So if you see someone arguing about why ultra processed foods are killing you and terrible for you, if you ask them what an ultra processed food is, I guarantee you most of them would have to Google the definition.
Yeah.
Because it's just become this thing. So like ultra processed food, some people will say it's a food that you can't make in your kitchen. Some people will say if it has more than this number of ingredients, it's probably an ultra processed food. Some will say it has to be made by food manufacturers and it has to tick certain criteria or whatever. But ultimately, a lot of ultra processed foods are not that nutritious, like a chocolate bar or ice cream or a cookie or whatever. But a lot of things that still fall under the ultra processed food umbrella are different, like bread. A lot of breads are ultra processed. And if you said to someone, okay, here is a chocolate bar and here is ice cream and here is bread, do you think these will have an identical impact on your health in the long run? You'd be like, no, why would you think that? But they still fall under the ultra processed food umbrella. So what has emerged is ultra processed food has become this monolith boogeyman kind of word where anything that's ultra processed must be killing you. And I'm like, look, if, for example, one person is eating more bread and another person is eating cookie dough, this is not the same thing.
Correct.
So food processing has just become this kind of vague term that people throw around as an easy way to make it sound like the videos they are presenting are evidence-based. But most people will know that not all food processing is bad. So we'll separate like ultra-processed food and food processing just for the benefits of the explanation. But processing, like green tea is processed, whey protein is processed, olive oil is processed, bread is processed. Everything is processed to a degree, is there are a lot of different types of food processing that you can do. And ideally, someone would educate you on why specific food qualities or ingredients would be dangerous and why. So you can look at the back of a junk food item and say, this is very high in sodium. This is very high in saturated fat. This is very high in this oil because they're deep frying it. We know that these things are linked with worse health. And I think that's great. I think that'd be a great way to educate people, but it's boring.
It is boring, unfortunately. Let's move on. One of my favorite videos of yours, in one of my favorite videos of yours, you discuss spoon theory.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what spoon theory is and specifically how it relates to people who are perceived as lazy?
Yes. So spoon theory, I apologize. I can't remember the name of the person who founded it. When I made the video, I put it in brackets on purpose. But it was supposed to be an explanation for how much mental or physical bandwidth someone can dedicate towards something. So it's like you have a certain amount of energy per day, and you're like, you will use 1 spoon on your own workout. You will use however many spoons on looking after your adorable children. You will use this many spoons spending time with your lovely wife. Use this many spoons working on your business. And she's like, this is how many spoons most people can dedicate to their day. And then she said someone with a chronic illness or a chronic disease doesn't have this many spoons. So they don't have as much in the way of internal resource that they can then devote to different aspects of their day. And this struck a chord with me very, very strongly, because when I was ill, I remember to my core, I remember this. When I was really, really ill, my energy levels were so low that you could have offered me large sums of money to have one normal day at work and I wouldn't have been able to do it. I was struggling to get myself out of bed. And I'm someone that's highly active. Lying in bed all day is not something I want to do. I was so exhausted and in so much pain that getting myself out of bed was genuinely difficult. It could sometimes take me 5 minutes to get out of bed because I had so much pain in my body that I used to have to try and rock myself back and forth and find ways to get up. I remember holding onto the headboard of my bed as hard as I could, pulling on it, trying to roll over, and I couldn't do it. The first time I went back to the gym, when I was lying on a bench, I couldn't sit up on my own, and I had to wait for someone to come and pull me up just to show like how weak I was. And I was in so much pain that I couldn't get out of bed comfortably. I would say at least 5 minutes of trying to find a way to get up without excruciating pain. And day-to-day life was really, really difficult, really difficult. And I was so tired and in so much pain and so exhausted that the things that were basic functions for me and most humans felt like insurmountable tasks. So I went for weeks where I never made my own food because I was struggling to walk to the bathroom. So the idea of standing in the kitchen for 20 minutes while I try and make something nutritious, it just wasn't going to happen. I like standing up for that long was hard. I was having to lean on things. I was having to use crutches. I was having to hold people. So I was relying on other people looking after me. Like my mum basically became my nurse, which when you go from a fit and athletic personal trainer to your mum having to make food for you because you can't stand up on your own, it's a very humbling experience. And I remember it was a family friend who came over, and he hadn't been in the trenches with me like my mum had when she had seen me at my worst. And I was talking to him about how much I was struggling, and I was like, I can't remember what it was, but I think I was showering something literally like once a week. It was unhygienic. It was unhygienic. But just standing for that long in the shower was hard, and getting in and out of the bath was difficult. So I would go and have a quick shower every few days, and then I would immediately go and lie down again. And I remember him looking at me and be like, "That's disgusting." Literally, was like, "That is gross." And one of my other family members kind of tried to chime in, and he's like, "You don't realize how ill he's been." And he was like, I don't care how ill he's been. Like,
geez.
there's no way that I could go that many days without having a shower. Like, I need to shower every day. And I'm like, you do not understand what it was like. So when people say you don't understand what living with a disease is like or what chronic disease is like, unless you have lived with it, I empathize with that. And mine is nowhere near as severe as a lot of people's is. So I don't want to be the spokesperson for everyone suffering with something. But I remember, is this controversial to say?
Say it.
I don't think it's controversial to say. If I had the strength, I think I'd have hit him. And I'm not a violent person. I'm not a violent person. The amount of rage I felt in myself when I heard someone saying that to my face,
Yeah.
like I was disgusting. My hygiene was disgusting. My habits were disgusting. Like I was this pathetic person. You don't even shower. Like you don't shower every day. That's disgusting. And I was like, you are seeing me a few weeks after the worst period of my life, a period of my life that I wasn't sure. I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to survive it. And you're making it sound like one of the things I felt like I couldn't do was just, well, why didn't you just
As
do
though
it?
it was a choice.
That wasn't I wasn't choosing. People would be like, everyone's got choices. Everyone's got the same choice, like yes or no. But that's not, when people say choices aren't the same, that's not actually what they're saying. Of course, you could say I had a choice to shower or not. I'm not arguing that. It's the difficulty of said choice
Correct.
that is the actual topic of discussion. The amount of effort it used to take, like for me to go and have a shower, I would literally lie down the rest of the day. And it's very hard to explain. People that have been through it know it. And people that haven't been through it probably won't resonate with it. And that's okay. So when I talked about spoon theory, the reason I talk about stuff like this is because more people will listen to me now as someone who has kind of been through a tunnel to someone who has always been in a tunnel. And I think that's a real shame. If I talk about times when I struggled with depression or times where I was considering whether I wanted to live or not, and the hardest periods of my life from a physical health perspective, I can talk about it now because I have a platform. But someone who has spent their whole life with chronic depression or their whole life with a disease that has robbed them of their joy, they haven't come out of the other end to have enough energy to want to talk about it, most of them. So I view it as trying to use my platform responsibly to voice the important messages that other people perhaps wouldn't voice. And the reason I wanted to explain that is because I think so many people in the fitness industry view it as, if you're struggling with something, you must be lazy. You don't have time to work out, lazy. And I'm like, it's not really quite how it is. Like, there are a lot of people who are very dedicated to the fitness industry. They're very dedicated to working out. And then when they have kids, all of a sudden they find it hard.
Yep.
Or they change job, all of a sudden they find it hard. Or they move home and all of the life stress means that they don't go to the gym for a while. And I think it's really criminal to immediately point at someone and go, you are lazy because you're not going to the gym, when you're like, well, actually in reality, they're not lazy. They're just devoting their spoons elsewhere. So one of my favorite stories, I made a video on this a couple of times. I remember a really good friend of mine. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he was like, I don't go to the gym as much as I should. How often do you work out? And I was like, 6 days a week. And he's like, oh my God, you're so disciplined. And it slapped me in the face as this moment of realization that he was looking at me as disciplined. And I'm like, bro, I fucking work in a gym. I work in the gym. I work in the fitness industry. I can see 2 clients in the morning, get changed and start my workout within 5 minutes. I can do an hour workout before my next client. It's super easy for me. And he was a guy with 2 children. He was working far away where he had a pretty hefty commute to work. So I told him to talk me through his day, and he's like, well, I have to wake up at like 5 in the morning or whatever time it was. I have a long drive to work. I work long hours. Then I have a long drive home. When I get home, I refuse to work out until I've spent quality time with my wife and kids. Like, the best thing that you could say, I think, as a father. I won't do anything for myself until I have been with my kids while they've eaten dinner, spent some time with my wife. Once, and I remember him saying this to me, he said, once I have read my daughters a bedtime story, that is when I go to the gym. And I was like, bro, you go to the gym at 9 p.m. and you've been up since 5 a.m.? I was like, I wouldn't do that. You're looking at me as someone who exercises 6 times a week as being disciplined, but I have all the odds stacked in my favor. If I had his daily routine, I wouldn't be working out 6 times a week. And I was like, if anything, you are working far harder at life than I am, but you're seeing the fact that my gym routine is more consistent and viewing me as the dedicated one. I'm like, you're way more dedicated. You've got a harder job. You have harder life circumstances. You have more balls that you're juggling in the air to feel like you can keep this one going as well. Whereas for me, I'm like, job, fitness, they're kind of the same ball anyway. Social life a little bit, like these are my 2, and he's got fucking 7 going and worrying that he's occasionally dropping one.
You know, one of the reasons I really enjoyed your discussion around spoon theory, your video on it, and then just now is because I don't know anyone who doesn't want their friends and family to be healthy. Like everyone, and especially people who are already fit and in shape and working out consistently, they want their friends and family to get on board with it. And one of the most common questions I get, I'm sure you as well, is how do I get my husband? How do I get my wife? How do I get my daughter? How do I get my parent, whatever, to do this? And when I was growing up, it was you shame them, you guilt them, you call them fat, you call them lazy.
Yeah.
Fortunately, there's been a shift, but that group still exists. And if you truly want to help someone, if that's like actually your goal, you are causing more damage through the shame and the guilt than you are through empathizing with them. Now, I do think it's important to distinguish between empathize and enable. They're 2 different things. And I think some people will confuse and say, oh, you're just enabling them to not work out. You're enabling them to not eat healthy. No. I can empathize with how difficult their situation is without enabling them to continue a path that is potentially more harmful. But the research is clear on this. And my own practical experience, as I'm sure yours is, if you actually want to help someone have a better chance of making this lifestyle change to improving their health, improving their habits, it has to come from a place of empathy without shame and without guilt. And I think the spoon theory that you presented gives people an opportunity to understand, okay, if I'm starting with 10 spoons and by the time I get my workout in, I've only removed 3 of those spoons, there are other people who maybe they're only starting out with 5 spoons and they've given away 4.5 of them already. It's like, it gives you a little bit more of a visual to understand that we all technically have 24 hours. We all technically have these choices. It doesn't mean we have the same level of responsibility, the same amount of energy, the same ease of choices. There are so many other factors that come into play. And again, it's not enabling, it's just being intellectually honest and being able to empathize with someone who's in a different situation.
I feel like, for whatever reason, I feel like there are people in the fitness industry that just don't realize that they're massive arseholes.
I'll just spit out that water.
And there's such a militant threshold and expectation where it's like, if you're not meeting this, you fucking suck. Do you know? So like, I remember years ago, the first time I made a video saying, stop saying everyone has the same 24 hours a day, I didn't think it was very controversial because I'm like, all I'm saying is some people have busier lives, more responsibilities to juggle, and their time to go to the gym is hard. And this is based on working with clients clients who've built multi-million-dollar businesses from the ground. Those days when you're working 80 hours a week and you're not seeing your husband or wife and you're struggling to see your kids and all of the things that people sacrifice, feel like they were getting shamed because they were struggling to keep up an exercise routine. And I'm like, I find that baffling that you're like objectively working more hours than I am, but you think you're being lazy because you're only going to the gym 3 times a week instead of 4, 5 or 6. Like, there seemed like such a cognitive disconnect there. And the first time I made a video saying, stop saying everyone has the same 24 hours a day, I remember one personal trainer getting super angry with me, so unnecessarily angry with me, where he was in the comments, he was in every comment, just like, he was mad, proper pissed. And I thought it was funny because it was like the perfect epitome of why I had to make the video in the first place.
Yes.
Because whilst he was arguing that I was wrong, people were commenting saying, I feel so seen. You're the first person I have ever seen verbalize the way that I feel. And instead of reading those and being like, oh, interesting, you fucking suck. This is incorrect. But I'm just like going on this tirade. And when I talk about this, I will always, without fail, get messages from people and comments from people saying things like, I have never gone to the gym before. I have hated going to the gym. I find it exhausting or intimidating or terrifying or whatever it is. And feeling like you're supporting me has been enough to make me go for the first time. Or people that have started an exercise routine from scratch and they're like, I used to really struggle to go to the gym, but I saw your video on spoon theory and I've been doing extra walking or whatever it is. And it's like, these are the type of messages that to some people help them go from 0 to 1 or from 0 to 2, rather than being like, you're not at 100, you fucking suck. You suck. You suck so bad. Whereas I'm like, actually, like some people you can shame them into change. I do think that it's possible.
Small percentage.
I know people who have said like, I got shamed and then I went to the gym. I'm not denying that exists. I'm saying that it doesn't resonate with everyone. To a lot of people, it can backfire. Even when it works, it often causes collateral damage, because if I can shame you to go to the gym because I call you fat and lazy or whatever, you might start going to the gym, but you're still someone who's like, I feel really hurt by what you said.
Yeah.
And I'm like, could we get them to go to the gym without doing the other thing? Yeah. That's how I view it.
And there are people who start from shame. That happens. But if you're looking for the most statistically probable way of not only getting them to change, but also do it from a healthy way, there's no question that shame and guilt is not the best way, right?
This is, it's actually surprisingly well documented in research, where if you ask people's attitudes towards exercise or you expose them to an experimental condition where they feel shame, it often goes in the other direction. So for example, there's like a research paper where they give people a control condition or like a weight shaming condition. And it's like, lose weight or you will lose your job, is like an article. And there's a test food afterwards where it's like, read this or watch this video or watch this video. And one of them is designed to make them feel shame. And then it will test what happens afterwards. And often people who feel shame about weight specifically go on to eat more food rather than less food. And there are a lot of people who, when they feel shamed about their weight, they don't gravitate towards exercise, they gravitate away from it. And that, I don't think it's actually that controversial to explain to people, because when you were at school, did you ever have people who were bullied and then they would avoid PE classes? Because it's the same thing.
Yeah, of course.
So if you make someone feel shit for the way they look or for their health or for how much body fat they have, if they become more embarrassed to then exercise in front of other people, that hasn't helped them.
Correct.
And I've had clients, like, part of the reason I feel so strongly about this is not just because I like reading research and communicating research to people. I have had clients, I remember one in particular, she came to me as a personal trainer in a commercial gym, and she was just too embarrassed to exercise around other people. So there we are in a fairly luxurious commercial gym. This isn't like a rusty powerlifting dungeon that hardcore people go to. This is a nice place. This is a fancy place. The equipment's nice. It's kept clean. It's for slightly wealthier clientele. And even though we had that gym there, which had quite a diverse range of clients, most of them tended to earn at least a little bit above the average, I had to exercise with her in private. So we were there in winter, exercising outside, literally next to the luxury gym she was paying for, because she would rather do that than exercise in the gym. So it's like, if this is the door to the gym here, on the other side of that gym is a lovely climate-controlled luxury experience with changing rooms, sauna, steam room, swimming pool, everything you want. The other side of that door, we would train outside in winter, wearing gloves, hat, warm jackets, because she would rather do that than exercise around other people. So when people are like, you need to shame someone, tell them that they're fat, tell them that they're lazy, tell them that they suck, and it will make them change. I'm like,
Good luck.
yeah.
That's why I hate those videos where people are making fun of people at the gym. And
I hate those videos.
I literally, someone this morning, might have been last night, within the last 12 hours, a woman said she doesn't work out at the gym because she's scared of getting made fun of because of her weight. And the worst part is I know how amazing people at the gym can be. And I also know how horrible they can be. Not necessarily from numerous personal experiences, but from what I see online. There are so many videos of people being assholes. And so if I wasn't as confident as I am, and if I wasn't brought up in this world, if I didn't start at this training when I was like 14, I fully understand. I would be petrified to go as well. I get it.
I feel like whenever I talk about reasons why, so like if you ask, you can survey people and say, why don't you want to go to the gym? And if you ask 100 people why you don't want to go to the gym, you can actually get a decent analysis of people's subjective reasons. And a lot of people don't go to the gym because of things like, I'm intimidated by the environment. There are other things like geographically, there aren't that many gyms close to me, or I can't afford the membership. There are things like that. But a lot of them are, I don't like the environment. I find it intimidating. I find fitness instructors intimidating. I don't find them very supportive. There are a lot of things within the gym environment that we could change as an industry to make it more welcoming to people. And whenever I talk about this, I will always say, like, we can improve the gym atmosphere to get more people feeling comfortable going to the gym in the first place. And someone will always be like, why are you shaming gyms? Like, gyms can be amazing. I'm not shaming gyms. I'm saying that we can improve.
Yeah.
And I'm the same as you, where I have been working out in some capacity, I think since I was like, I don't know, 16, 15, if you count like lifting weights in my bedroom, maybe. I can't remember. But I've also traveled a lot, and I have trained in dozens, possibly over 100 gyms in various countries, continents, whatever. Some gyms are amazing and some gyms fucking suck. There are some gyms that if I was brand new, I wouldn't want to go there.
Absolutely not.
I've been in, I remember one gym that was like very, very male dominated. And it was so male dominated that you would have thought on any given day it was a men's only gym. Very bodybuilder-esque, like the owner was a bodybuilder, lots of heavy weights. I remember, I promise you, every single fucking time a woman walked in, the number of guys that would turn their heads and like leer at her, it was gross. And I remember watching it being like, I don't even know how this is okay, but you can't go over to people and say, can you not look? But I remember describing it to someone, and I was like, it's like watching a rabbit go into the lion's den. Because everyone, like, it felt like this surge of testosterone being directed at this, like, who's this stranger entering our space? And one of the people who worked there was a woman, and I was like, do you train here? Like, are you okay with it? Because I wouldn't go there. And I'm like, if I've seen that environment, I think it's fair to say that that environment exists to other people, because hopefully we could, be a bit more friendly. But then I've also seen gyms that were fucking amazing. Some of the best things I've seen, like even recently, I was in Germany at a CrossFit event. One of the best things I've ever seen. There was a CrossFit event, like CrossFit Open, where people turned up, they did their run. Next group of people, they did their run. Then after a while, they did elite athletes only, people that have been flown across the world. So they did this elite open, the CrossFit Open. And then after that, one guy, I don't even know why, I'd been outside, I didn't know what was happening and why he was doing it. One guy went on his own after all of the elites. And I thought the elites were supposed to be the headline event. But for some reason, there was a guy who was just going solo. And I was like, what's happening? Have I missed something? Was he supposed to go earlier and he didn't, or whatever? And this guy, it's fair to say you could tell early on that he wasn't an avid CrossFitter, as in he is not super experienced, super fit. Within like 3 minutes of it starting, he was fucking dying. And I remember, when you see someone working in the gym and you've got an idea of their rate of perceived exertion and you've got an idea of how long they can sustain that, I'm pretty good at estimating that. I saw him 3 or 4 minutes in. I was like, he's going to vomit. He's going to vomit so soon. He was like You could see the pain on his face 3 or 4 minutes in, and it was a 15-minute
Oh no.
AMRAP. And I'm like, he's gone out too hard, too soon. He's going to throw up. I remember being like, someone's going to need to get him a bucket. And the elite athletes who had been there before him, a group of them gathered around him, cheering him on.
Oh wow.
And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
it was sick. And there were these people cheering for him. There were these people that were coaching him. They were getting up like close to him, but in a nice way. And I remember, even though they were coaching him, that someone was videoing it. You'll see it on the video if you ever see it. But they were still looking at each other like, he's not going to fucking make it. So they, come on, you can do this, you can do this. But you could still see them like, he's in too much pain for this soon. And somehow he managed to get to the end. But I have seen more people cheering for that one guy than I have ever seen anything outside of actual athletic events, because there were dozens of people who were there to watch the Open.
Yeah.
There were elite athletes who were watching. Everyone was fucking cheering that one guy. And it was this amazing thing that he was like 12 minutes in out of the 15. He was pausing, he was panting, he was looking up at the clock, he was on his last legs. And I remember him taking his top off, and the crowd went fucking wild. They went wild. Like, everyone started screaming and clapping, and there's like whistling, and there's just like so much support for this guy. And he managed to get to the end. And it was like probably the single most positive gym environment I have ever seen, because it was all directed at one person.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, if he'd been doing that on his own, he would have quit.
Yeah.
The pain on his face, I would have quit if I was in as much pain as he was in. But having that many people cheering for him and shouting for him, and I was like, that is what gym environments can be. So I know when people are like, no, gym environments can be amazing, like, why are you making it sound like they're shit? It's like, because some of them are shit. Yeah. And it would be great if we could make more of them like that, because that environment was the environment where you would try something if you were scared to try it, and you would push harder because you had people that were proud of you. And that is what I think is so important that you were getting at, where you're like, you can do it from a place of empathy and support rather than a place of shame.
I don't know why people get so mad if you call something or someone out if they did something not well, and I should say inappropriate or any of those things. It doesn't make every single person in that world like for like a police officer. Like, there are amazing cops, they're incredible cops, and there are also really shitty cops. There are amazing lawyers, and there are terrible lawyers. There are amazing personal trainers, and there are terrible personal. We should be able to recognize the good ones and say, like, this is amazing, like, you're doing incredible, and also equally look like, hey, this situation was really bad, and we should be able to discuss it without being made out to be like, you hate this group of people, or you hate this profession, or you hate whatever it is. I've never understood the dogmatism there.
And I've actually seen someone made a video about me, I think, or they reposted something. I can't remember what it was, the context. And I remember one of the comments was like, I really like that guy. He does like shit on the fitness industry a lot, but I really like his content. And I was like, I don't shit on the fitness industry. I don't understand how you've got that from my content. Like, I love the fitness industry.
Right.
It is all I have done since I started working in gym before I was even qualified to be a personal trainer. I've worked in the fitness industry, I think, since I was like 17. I love it. I just say, here are some things that I think we could improve.
Yeah.
But like you say, sometimes it's very easy to view things as a binary perspective where you hate something or you love something. And if I view some aspects within that as negative, I like to be able to discuss them. Like, I think we can improve. I think some personal trainers are a bit shit. Yep. I think some social media fitness influencers put out terrible information. I think most people who film in grocery stores put out terrible information. And I would prefer to itemize the things I think we can improve on so we can make everything better. That doesn't mean that I hate every personal trainer or everyone who films in a grocery store. I'm just saying,
Correct.
Here's the itemized list of ways that I think we could improve.
I've asked this question to both Mike and Eric, the only two other people I've had on the podcast. I'm going to ask you, I might make it a recurring one. What has been your favorite or peak time with your own training / workouts? Like, out of all the years you've been training and working out, what time period have you enjoyed the most with your own workouts, and what were you doing?
Good question. I think I have two.
Okay.
I used to periodically set goals for me, intentionally to make sure that my motivation stayed there. So even when I was training a lot, I used to book in photo shoots, which was kind of my own personal equivalent of stepping on stage like fitness models would. And I used to set kind of periodic goals. And when you've got a goal there, it's easier to kind of push for something. So you spend how many years powerlifting, but then you book a powerlifting meet. All of a sudden there's a focus there. And mine have always been where there was a goal in the back of my mind that made me work a little bit harder because I did things I couldn't do otherwise. And I think that is actually the most important take home, because what I did is perhaps less relevant. But there were examples where I had a bench press goal I wanted to hit, a pull-up goal I wanted to hit, a deadlift goal I wanted to hit. And that would be often the thing that was in the back of my mind when I was waking up in the morning knowing I was going to the gym soon.
Yeah.
I'm not just going for a workout. I'm like, I'm going to try this weight today.
Yeah.
I'm getting closer. And it was that to me that was the enjoyment of it. So the most recent example of that I think is most pertinent is my half marathon. Because I went from zero, like actual zero for recreational jogging. My first ever jog was 3 minutes outside, or then 5 minutes fast walking on the treadmill. And when I had the motivation to run to surprise my wife, my whole attitude towards it changed, because rather than just going out for a jog, I'm like, I've got a 5K in 3 months. I've got to try and hit a standard, because if I'm going to surprise her, if I say to her in the morning that I'm going to join her in the 5K, which is one of the things she wanted us to do together at one point, like go running together. If I turn up and she's excited that I have broken this surprise to her, and she realizes I've been running in secret to make this whole thing amazing, but then I suck or I throw up, it'll be really embarrassing. So I remember running, being like, she doesn't know I'm running as much as I am. This is good. What I'm doing is good. This is new for me. But in X number of days, I'm running a 5K with her. And if I throw up on the sidelines, I'm going to embarrass myself. So in this many days, I have got the one shot at making this the big romantic gesture that I wanted it to be. And I remember being on the treadmill being like, this workout is fucking hard. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have done it.
I love that.
That was the difference between me going for a jog and running with a purpose. And it was the difference between me, I've done my jog for the day, and I jogged. I did the run that I wanted. I stuck to the plan when the plan was hard, because the goal was there. So it wasn't I don't think it's necessarily the peak of physical fitness. It's not like my half marathon performance is going in any record books anytime soon. But for me, it was the biggest achievement from scratch that I did. So I think that's the most noteworthy one.
What misconceptions do people have about you?
I think probably more people than I would like think I'm an asshole.
Why do they think that?
So recently on TikTok, there was a video where someone said, tag any fitness influencer that everyone loves. And it was just engagement bait.
Yeah, of course.
Question. There were a few people who commented and said, it's impossible to hate Ben Carpenter. And I remember reading that and being like, oh, you sweet, sweet child. If you think that's the case, they should open like
your
DMs. my YouTube notifications any day of the week to see the discrepancy. The biggest misconception for people watching this video or listening to this podcast, I think, is I am not a confrontational person. I do not like confrontation. I make response videos to people because I'm asked questions, and I make response videos to people where I think the misinformation can be dangerous, but I don't thrive doing it. I'm not one of those people who's looking for drama. I'm not one of those people who's dying to create controversy because it's good for the engagement, good for the algorithm. I make videos because I think the topic is needed. So when I make response videos to people, I'm not dying to argue. If anything, I hate arguing. Ask my wife. I will happily avoid whole situations for months at my own detriment just to save one awkward conversation once. Very people-pleasing type of person. So when I make response videos, a lot of people think, and I know this based on the number of comments that I get scattered across social media platforms, that I'm doing it because I am trying to shit on other people, and I'm not. I've never been that type of person. I don't look for videos where I'm like, who can I criticize? Who can I create a rebuttal to? What clickbait can I argue with? I create videos because people send them to me and say, what do you think? And when I worked in gyms, clients used to come up to me and say, hey, I saw this newspaper article saying that eggs cause heart disease. Do you think it's true? Or I saw this video saying you have to do your cardio fasted to burn fat. Is that true? And I would answer. And sometimes your answer isn't very nice. You're like, whatever video you have seen, that's nonsense. And I basically do that on social media now. And I will often try and dispel misconceptions, but I'm not doing it because I'm dying for an argument. I would much rather never argue with people again. I just do it because I think the information is needed.
I like that. It makes total sense. What are you scared of?
Fucking hell, this would be a long list. We need to start a new
We'll
podcast
just do one.
episode for this.
Just one.
What am I
We
scared
have two more.
of?
This is the second to last question.
Is the next question more profound, or is this like the end?
There's one more after this. I don't know if it's more profound,
Okay.
but
I want to make this good. Am I allowed like a few seconds to think about
yeah,
it? Or do you
take
want
your
my
time.
What am I most scared of? All right. This is a deep one. I have to look off camera in case I get teary. I think one of the things that I'm most scared of is I told you I'd make it profound. That's why I was like, give me a few seconds because I'll make it good. One of the things I should have just been like, oh, I'm fucking scared of swimming or something. I tell you one of the things I'm most scared of. This is like a conversation for the therapist. This is like the type of conversation I don't even have with my friends. It's hard. One of the things that I'm most scared of is that when I was ill, it robbed more of my life than I know how to get back. I think that's always been hard for me. Like we've talked about aspects of it, fitness, like my strength, fitness levels, muscle mass, things that I lost when I was ill, but it's been a lot. It's been a lot deeper than that, I think, and I think it includes things like my own confidence. I think my own career success is another one. I lost years of my life. It's not just the period of being ill, it's how long the recovery period is afterwards. So people thought, oh, he was ill for a few weeks or whatever. When I first met my wife, I physically couldn't I couldn't do a bodyweight squat to parallel because I had so much joint pain. Even 6 years ago, I was on holiday with my friends and I was having so much joint pain, which is a common side effect of Crohn's disease. I was having so much joint pain that I couldn't walk up the stairs properly. Jeez. So I was like holding on and like one step. And I think it's robbed a lot from my long-term ability to succeed at a lot of things, because it's not just the physical side, it's the emotional confidence and the feelings of self-efficacy that you believe you can do something. You know what you can do for your business because you have had years of working on your business, and over time you have built expectations. You see what you can achieve when you put your mind to it. I felt like when I was doing well in life and then it was interrupted, I had to start from scratch again. And then when I was ill the second time, I had to start from scratch again. So I feel like I lost a lot more of my 20s than most people realize. And I feel like I don't want to say I feel like I'm underachieving, because some people might look at me and think, well, you still achieved a lot compared to me, and I don't want anyone to feel shit by comparison. I feel like I've underachieved relative to what I would have done if I'd never been ill, and that's hard.
I will say, for whatever it's worth, I mean, again, it's just my perspective, and I'm not saying, I think that the way you frame it is like you've underachieved relative to what you could have.
Yeah.
I do think that's a valid way of feeling, right? I also think that it's the ability that you've gained, and I'm not saying the way you feel is wrong, but I'm just giving my perspective that you didn't ask for, to inspire and increase the self-efficacy of others who have gone through it, are going through it, or will go through it, to show that despite the horrific things you went through, you've still been able to succeed, even though it's less than maybe you would have otherwise. The positivity that you've been able and will continue to be able to instill within others who are also struggling or have struggled or will struggle, I think it's probably worth it, I would imagine, for if this is you underachieving, to have that ability to reach millions of people who might also be struggling, to then get them to maybe achieve more than they would have without your story. Yeah. That's just my thoughts.
I think that's a very kind way to view it, and yeah, thank you. I try and view it similarly, not because I'm trying to find a silver lining to a cloud that I think is dark necessarily, but because in many ways I don't regret what happened. Not that I had a choice over it, but I feel like the learning curve that it gave me was just a different life path, if you will. I might not have done as much as I would like to have done by this age. And I feel like in many ways I'm kind of underdeveloped. I'm not talking about like business and things like that. I just think what I would have done with my life feels like it's kind of kicked back a decade sometimes. But I do feel like one of the biggest gifts that it gave me is my ability to empathize with people that go through similar. And that's part of the reason that I'm very steadfast on making that type of content, because I think sometimes people think when I make content saying it's harder for some people than others, and I talk about things like mental health or physical health or whatever, I know there are always some people that think I'm pandering, and it bugs me. It really bugs me, because people are like, oh, you keep making content because you're pandering to lazy people or whatever. It's like, I will fucking fight you over this. It's not that. It's because I've been that person. Yeah. I've been in that place. I've worked with clients that feel like this. And to me, it's way more important that I reach that subset of people who have never felt spoken to by other personal trainers, especially personal trainers that look like I do. I've had clients that are like, when I first met you, I didn't think we would gel because you're like a young buff, when I was younger, young buff personal trainer. And I didn't think like, to me, reaching those people is way more important than the occasional person that thinks I'm pandering by making that type of content. So I think it's nice that you said that. Thanks.
Last question. What are you excited about?
I'm excited for the next chapter of my life with my wife, however that looks. I feel like that's actually a bit of a cop-out, because every time I'm asked a nice question, she's like the answer, but that's how I feel.
We can leave it at that. Ben Carpenter, can you just name your books again for people who want to buy them?
Yeah, they are called Everything Fat Loss and Fat Loss Habits.
Everything Fat Loss and Fat Loss Habits, 2 separate books. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Please share this episode as far and wide as you possibly can. Make sure you follow Ben. I'll put all of his information in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.